What's up, Reapers? My name's Seth, and today we're going to be talking about the Trove Vanguard. We're going to be talking about a couple different ways that you can end up building the character, more specifically focused on Shadow Towers and then just general U9. I'm going to have a different video that already is technically out talking about the speed build that you can end up using for this guy because it's a little bit more complicated because generally speaking we want to just kind of break down like the basic stats that you're going to be needing for this character and blah 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 blah. Ultimately though, I'm just going to say straight up, guys, this character is a powerhouse. No matter what you end up doing, he just ends up clearing U9 no problem. He's going to end up being one of the only characters that can end up actually doing that at some of the lower levels in the game. Granted, of course, you know, you can end up just having really good gear to make your character strong, but for the most part, it's just going to end up being a very powerful character in general. So as of right now, anyways, I've got this character set up at, ooh, I'm not even wearing an ally right here. Let me do that with a Raptor Berserker. Don't know why I didn't have my ally on. That was weird. But we've got over 26k PR. I would be the strongest Vanguard in the entire game power rank wise, just because of the simple fact that I'm missing the dumb Divinity Dragon. If not for that, I would actually be the top, which is pretty exciting. I'm not trying to say it to brag or anything. I just think that it's kind of cool to actually be this powerful. Otherwise, there's a couple people on top of me right now. But in either case, what you're going to be going for the furthest character is you want an energy regen ring if possible, because as you end up using this character, you're going to be using your right click a lot. And so long as you actually have energy, you can actually spam your right click, which is really cool that they ended up actually keeping that from the test server over to the live server. Then for the gear itself, you're going to want attack speed, second stat on all of your sets of stellar gear. That's going to end up being detrimental to the character because it's an attack speed character. As you have more attack speed, you're doing that much more damage, right? So what you go for the last stat, I would go for movement speed. If you're going into Shadow Towers, you're going to want to re-roll the movement speed over to being crit damage if you actually can spare the tentacles. But you don't have to. I don't really bother doing that too often. I just kind of stay at a solid movement speed. Even for the weapon as well, you're going to want to keep that, because that extra crit damage is going to end up giving you extra damage for Shadow Towers, yes, and there it is going to end up making a difference. But when you're doing like normal farming and stuff like that, it doesn't really matter. You're going to be one-shotting everything. Raptor Berserker for your ally. And then I always just use Death-Defying. But then there's two different ways that you can end up building the character. If you're strong enough and one-shotting U9 bosses, you can actually sacrifice your Martial Emblem for Chromatic because you don't need the extra damage. This character is that powerful. But otherwise, the standard is you're going to want to go for Death-Defying Martial Emblem and then just use Sure Strike until you're powerful enough that you can end up swapping this off to Trailblazing, because then you're going to be able to have that movement speed trigger every single time that you end up actually using a flask, right? So you can also build this character another way, which is the Starry speed build way, and I'll talk about that in another video just because it's again, it's a little bit different than this. But otherwise, I like to swap my martial out for my chromatic. The reason for this is just kind of as a fail safe, because your number one ability is going to end up giving you movement speed as well as a bit of extra damage and resistance and stuff like that, right? And you're going to be able to, well, in melee mode anyways, in ranged mode it's going to give you attack speed, but you don't really use ranged mode when you're farming U9. You're only going to be using that exclusively when you go to Shadow Towers. But every time you end up doing your normal attack, so long as you have your Class Gem ability, your third uppercut attack is going to end up triggering a cooldown on both your number 1 and your number 2. And then if you're in ranged mode, I think it's your fourth attack. It was your fifth, but they changed it so that it's your fourth attack is going to end up reducing the cooldown of both of these abilities. So when you're in Shadow Towers, it's kind of exciting because you're swapping from ranged mode to melee back and forth, back and forth. But when you're in just U9, you're just focusing on moving as fast as possible, and you're going to be using your right click I-beam as often as possible, right? So my stats are as follows. I don't have perfect stats because one of my gems I'm still trying to re-roll into a good one, but I'm at 115k damage. I would be at 125k damage. I would recommend that you have this character at maybe 70k physical damage to 100k physical damage if you can actually manage that. Of course, you're going to have augmented gems with that and use a lot of re-rollers to get the stats that you want, which I'll show you what I have for all of that a little bit later. And then crit hit should average out to about 100% as you end up having fully augmented gems, but otherwise, because this character is attacking as fast as he is, it means that he's one of those characters that's fortunate enough where you don't have to have 100% crit hit for it to be an effective class. You can get away with 75% and up, not to mention using Sure Strike will end up ironing that out. And then for my crit damage, I'm at 1,600. I would be at 1,700, which is kind of the average that I would recommend as your absolute maximum for crit damage if I ended up having it on all of my gear, but we have the movement speed, lest we forget. But you can get away with having 1,000% crit damage and then just, again, like maybe 75,000 for your physical damage. Honestly, if you can, I would recommend that you get to 100,000 physical damage, 75% crit hit, and then 1,200 crit damage just as a base to work from there. And then you slowly end up augmenting your gems over time. Now, the way that I build my gems is very specific. It's not really that crazy or complicated or anything, but I always end up having 3 gems, always lesser gems, that end up having 2 squares, that's what these are called right here, into my crit damage, and then 1 square into physical. And I have no squares in any crit hit on any of my gems. But I always make sure to have the crit damage 2 squares on my lesser gems, and then for 3 other lesser gems, it's physical damage with 2 squares and crit damage with 1 square for the last 3 gems. And then for all of my empowered gems, it's all physical or nothing, baby. Physical, crit damage, crit hit as the last. And that should end up ironing out to a very, very nice build. Now, if you can, again, you're going to want to get your hands on a pyro disc, but I know that it's completely random. I never had a pyro disc until my most recent empowered gem unboxing video. I got really, really lucky in actually unboxing this bad boy pretty much right at the end of the video, if I recall. And man alive, it is absolutely awesome to have pyro disc when you're farming U9 because it makes you that much faster and is essential if you're actually trying to go for a speed build, which again, I'll have a separate video talking about that. The other empowered gem honestly doesn't really matter. Spirit Surge is okay. I would honestly recommend that if you can, you go for an empowered gem that's going to be one of the damaging ones. Cubit Curtain can be a good one for Shadow Towers, obviously, but if you're just going for raw damage, you want to have a gem that's going to end up giving you more attack damage, which ultimately isn't going to make that much of a difference when you're farming and stuff like that. So I would actually recommend Cubit Curtain if you can, because when you're in U9, you're not really going to worry about dying or doing damage because you're going to be doing just absurd amounts of damage anyways. And Cubit Curtain is going to give you that much more survivability in the Shadow Tower. And then there's the Class Gem ability, like I said, where it makes it connecting the final hit of a combo reduces the ability's cooldown slightly. Only one such gem can be socketed at a time, but the game fails to mention that the last hit in the combo for your melee is going to be the 1-2 uppercut, 1-2 uppercut, 1-2 uppercut. So what you end up doing for the meta of this character is while you're farming U9, you're trying to hit the enemy with the uppercut so that you end up killing an enemy with your uppercut, but also triggering the cooldown. So I can kind of show you what that's going to end up looking like right here as we end up going into U9 and getting a couple dungeons killed before I end up showing you what it's like when we end up using this character in Shadow Towers, right? So why I say to connect that uppercut as the last hit on an enemy is because you're going to be powerful enough that you're going to be killing enemies super duper quick. So if we fight this guy, you can see we already killed him technically before our uppercut ended up actually causing damage, because you didn't see 3 damage numbers actually float up. Maybe we did, but honestly it's really, really laggy right now. So let's see, 1, 2. Yeah, so our second attack will kill an enemy. So what you try to do is get up to an enemy by going 1 punch and then there's your uppercut. He ended up moving towards me, and the dino enemies are kind of a little bit different in their movement, but you hit him with an uppercut so that you end up triggering your cooldown, because then you can use your number 1 more often. And then otherwise we're triggering Raptor Berserker, our number 1 ability, Pyro Disc, and our Flash all at once, and that's where we're getting all of that crazy movement speed that you just saw right there, which is why this character is so fun. Because you can actually have him as a movement speed build that is going to be second to the Neon Ninja. Neon Ninja is still faster, but in order to use the Neon Ninja Rage speed build, check my links in the video to actually know more about that. But to get the Neon Ninja to be as fast as he is, you're going to have to end up building him in a very specific way as well. I don't know why I have chromatic and stuff, but you're going to be backflipping like an idiot. This is pretty much how you actually play with the endgame Neon Ninja for U9 farming, outside of the fact that I'm fumbling all over the place. You have to play the game backwards, which makes it almost impossible for people on console. But if you're backflipping on the ground, and especially using like trailblazing and also triggering your Raptor Berserker, you're going to be super duper fast. You're going to be able to outrun every class in the game. And you're going to be able to defeat dungeons pretty easily as well, except with this character, the Neon Ninja, you're going to have to do a 1-2-3 combo, backflip, and hit an enemy with your shuriken, as opposed to the Vanguard. He can just walk into a dungeon and mop the floor with the boss almost instantaneously. So that's where he ends up keeping up with the Neon Ninja very well, just because of the fact that you're also going to be able to see where you're going as you're farming with him, as opposed to the Neon Ninja, you have to backflip. So this is a prime instance where there's no enemies around, so I can't end up triggering my class gem ability to get my number 1 on cooldown. That is why I end up using the chromatic emblem, just as kind of a fail-safe, where it's like, oh, I'm not getting to this dungeon fast enough, let me drink a couple potions right here. But as you can see, it's just really laggy in general, and then you're gonna be able to get it going, right? So then we get a nice little uppercut combo here. We triggered our pyro disc, we got our raptor berserker, we got everything going. But otherwise, you're gonna see this is kind of how we end up killing these bosses super duper quick, is we're just gonna be able to laser their faces off. Another thing too that I would recommend is you could end up going for a jump ring if you don't have enough base jump just from mastery and stuff like that, right? Or just some of the dragons I think end up giving jump, or you can end up using a jump ally. It's really laggy right now, unfortunately. This rubber banding is ridiculous. But you can see also when we end up getting to this boss, this is without Marshall. I'm just gonna spam a bunch of right clicks and just have him, well, normally he would have died right away, but again, it's really laggy, so it's kind of a bad example. But let's hop on over into a Shadow Tower here, just so I can show you real quick what he's like for that. So again, as we're going into Shadow Towers, we're going to want to swap that movement speed off. You don't have to, but it is going to end up making a difference if you're just doing towers. I actually don't need to have the third stat I normally have as Magic Find. So let me see if I can get physical and crit damage to actually show up here. This is another reason why I would recommend that you just stick with the movement speed as your 4th stat, because otherwise you can just be randomizing your stuff like over and over again. And this is what the character's like without any movement speed. Absolutely disgusting. Like, seriously, I cannot stand it. So we're going to swap back over to Marshall because it's all about our damage output. And then again, I always like to use Death Defying, and I actually like to use Death Defying with the Unyielding emblem. I find that way you don't have to manage your potions, and every time you end up taking a hit, if you're building this character for all damage, you're going to end up dying in one hit in Shadow Towers anyways. And it's a lot easier to just have Death Defying triggering every time you end up taking critical damage from an enemy, rather than trying to trigger your potions over and over again manually. There's no real reason to. And then as far as the subclass ability, even for U9, I actually always recommend using the Knight, because as you end up having your Knight at level 30, you're going to get 6 to your flask capacity. And in my mind, more flask capacity means longer terms of grinding, because as you end up having more flasks, it means that while you're out farming U9, you can trigger your flask more often, you can get hit more often without having to return to a cornerstone or anything. And if you're in Shadow Towers, the extra flask capacity actually ends up giving you a lot more survivability than using the Lunar Lancer subclass ability, because the Lunar Lancer subclass ability, yes, technically it's going to end up being able to trigger lunacy mode and gives us a lot more damage output, but the survivability is much more important than damage output, because the way that you're going to be winning is by surviving the entire wave of enemies rather than just doing it, trying to do it with more damage. So as we end up setting up this character in this specific way, you're going to see we're going to just go straight for an Ultra Dot right here. Unfortunately, as of right now, it has generated within Arena, which the enemies that actually spawn in an arena are going to end up being that much weaker than enemies that spawn in a shadow dungeon, unfortunately. The difference between a dungeon and an arena is this is an arena, whereas a dungeon is like the full-on normal dungeon, right? But unfortunately, we got a couple other side spectators in here, but you're going to be able to see either way that we are going to be able to cause quite a bit of damage anyways, just normally, and this is just, also using our flask, and our unyielding is keeping us alive that much longer, so our flask drain is that much slower. And the way that you actually play this guy in Shadow Towers is a little bit different, because like I said, you're going to be spamming your number 1, because that's going to give you damage resistance as well as a bit of extra damage, but then you're also going to be going into ranged mode a lot as well, because it's going to give you a lot more survivability to be able to dodge those enemy attacks and stuff. And you're pretty much going to be spamming, like, you hold down your normal basic attack and you spam your right click, because you want to be using it as soon as your energy is up. because that's just going to end up being the extra damage, right? And then as in range mode, you use your number 1 to give yourself more attack speed. Now, what you can end up doing is use your number 1, swap to melee mode, so then you end up having more attack speed to it, and then you're going to be able to just kill things that much faster. Thankfully, that idiot died, because unfortunately, when you're trying to carry people in Shadow Towers, I don't even bother doing it because it's so annoying. Everybody tries to run around and survive for some reason, not realizing that as enemies are moving, you end up having less odds of actually hitting them because the hit detection is so trash in this game. And because of it, you can see we're draining way more flash than we need to, just because that one last enemy was dancing around rather than just focusing on me and staying beside me, where I could have actually killed it fast enough that we would have been able to survive. But we might actually do okay. Also, when you go into your ranged mode, you're going to end up regenerating all of your energy. And when you come back to melee mode, you're going to end up triggering a pull that's very similar to the Candy Barb's class gem ability or the Revenant's ultimate ability. And as you can see, you know, we still got 2 pots to spare. So are we going to be able to do this? That stupid Shadow Hunter, he just keeps on dying over and over. Good. So we're going to use our number 1, swap to our melee mode, use our number 1 again, and we got 1 flask left here, dude. Are we doing enough damage that we're actually going to be able to kill this guy? I don't know. Hopefully. Let me swap over to range mode, and he's pulling me in, unfortunately, which is really, really disappointing. And rip, we just died right there. But again, you can see that we would actually have been able to survive the entire wave if these 2 guys weren't just running around like fools. So I just wanted to have that as an example. You know, of course, it's kind of a bad example to show you me die at the end, but we would have been able to solo that, and that's an arena. An arena, in a lot of ways, I would say is harder for the Vanguard because of having to be up close and personal and be a melee character. Means that you have to take damage, whereas a lot of the ranged characters you can kind of just hide on the sidelines or jump around and stuff like that. With the Vanguard, you got to be up close and personal, and because of it, an arena is kind of a very, very good test of endurance. So it's kind of a way that you can really put your character to the test and see, are you actually playing the characters well on top of actually being strong enough to even handle Shadow Towers in the first place. Because as you see, you're spamming your abilities, man. Like, that's why he's so fun. You're using your abilities like crazy. On cooldown, you are using your abilities on this class, dude. Like, seriously. So it's very, very important to keep that in mind while you're like farming Shadow Towers. But again, you're not really going to be wanting to farm Daughter of the Moon that much anyways. And honestly, if you're going for Shadow Towers, there's a lot of other characters that do it better. But this video is just kind of focusing on the Vanguard itself. So I'm going to swap all of my gems back over, or not my gems, but all of my gear and everything, because I cannot stand to have this amount of slow movement speed. And then I'm going to get to recording the speed farming video so that you can end up seeing how you build that character. But in either case, thank you so much for watching, everybody. Very much appreciate it. Don't forget to like, share, favorite, and subscribe for more daily content. And if you want to support me, you can always sponsor my channel or check links in the description for my merch store, where you can buy this shirt and a bunch of other stuff. We got new shirts coming as well. Or you can check out Gawkbox, which is a way that you can donate to me for free. Sign on and stay epic, everybody.